So, what are my thoughts on Halloween Ends? You know what? I'm going to let Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman answer that question.
Have you ever seen anything like this? No.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Haunted Beard. Again, my name is Jake. Thank you for joining me today. Well, my time has finally come. I finally got a chance to sit down and watch Halloween Ends, and holy smokes, this thing has been kind of lighting the internet on fire over the last few days, and I've got some thoughts, so let's get into this thing. Now, this is probably going to be a bit of a longer review than normal. I'm going to not necessarily go through this thing scene by scene, but really try to go through it pretty thoroughly and just kind of give you my thoughts and then kind of wrap it up with a big conclusion at the end of my kind of overall thoughts. So here we go. So I'm not going to bother with a plot synopsis. If you're watching this, you know what this movie's about, and odds are you've seen Halloween and Halloween Kills, so you know what's going on. Anyways, the opening 10 minutes of this movie are, I think, quite good and really solid. I was impressed. I was into it. I like the setup here. You know, they kind of totally start you off on something that you would unexpect, right? It takes place a year after it's Halloween of 2019. We're introduced to this character, Corey. He's babysitting this boy, and there's just kind of some good suspense here. They kind of lead you to believe that the kid gets abducted by Michael Myers, and Corey's going around searching for him. And so just a great way to kind of start this thing off. It hits you with kind of a nice unexpected twist. You get this new character. You're kind of like, oh, what's going on here? You get some good suspense. And then the climax of this scene, just it really starts things off with a bang. When that kid drops from that balcony, man, I was like, holy smokes. And then the movie starts. So after this opening scene, we pick up back into the lives of Lori and Allison, and this is now present day, which is 3 years after that opening scene. And we find out that Laurie Strode is writing a memoir with her dealings with Michael Myers, and she's living with Allison. And then we cut back to Corey, and we basically learn that he's more or less kind of a social outcast. He didn't go to jail because it was an accidental death, but he has more or less been kind of disowned by the people of Haddonfield and is an outcast. And he ends up getting bullied and injured, and he goes into urgent care and meets Allison. And she knows him by reputation, but this is their first meeting, and it's clear from the get-go she has a bit of a crush on this guy. And it was at this point in the movie where I wrote down in my notes, why are we telling this story? And that's obviously going to lead into some more of my thoughts later on as I get into this, but let's just keep going through. After this, we get a scene with Lori at a grocery store, just really kind of a totally unnecessary scene where she talks to the sheriff, Will Patton's character, and it's just a scene that doesn't really need to exist or be in the movie, at least in my opinion. They kind of have the sheriff's character in this movie almost kind of unnecessarily. Like he doesn't really serve any sort of integral purpose to this, and so this scene is just kind of a throwaway scene and doesn't really need to be there. Then as Laurie's leaving, she gets confronted by this woman who I think it was her mother who was attacked in Halloween Kills but survived. Anyways, Laurie gets blamed for the whole thing with Michael Myers, that she provoked him and all that stuff. And this plays a larger part into the story as we get a couple more scenes like this where people blame Laurie for Michael's, psychopathic homicidal rage on the town of Haddonfield. And so it just kind of a bit of a weird choice, I guess, for me. Like, I don't really understand why they chose to kind of go with that route and why people would be blaming Laurie, but nevertheless, let's keep going. So then we're back to the Corey Allison storyline, and this is where the majority of the film really focuses on this. And at this point, they more or less go out for a date. They go to a bar, nightclub type thing, and they're dancing around and everything. And he gets confronted by the boy's mother, who died in the opening scene, and he ends up walking off. And it's about 35 minutes into the movie. There's a scene after he leaves the bar, him and Allison more or less have a breakup. And I wrote down in my notes at this point, I said Corey, actually, I'm going to read it. I said Corey is an interesting character, but so far it seems like he doesn't belong in the Halloween world. And that is more or less one of the main points that I want to make with this review overall. And I guess I'll just kind of pause here for a second, kind of make the larger point is that um, this Halloween Ends is really it's so interesting and odd and kind of bizarre and sort of mind blowing in a way in terms of what it does and how it tells this story. And that story and his character, like I said, is interesting. And you have this kid and sort of his character arc and his there's complexity and emotions and I think depth to his character. And so he's intriguing, but within the larger context of the Halloween world, he just seems so forced and like out of left field. And this movie just throws such a curveball with him because he's a brand new character. It's like he has nothing to do with any of this. And last time I checked, like the Halloween movies, this is a Laurie Strode, Michael Myers story. And by injecting him to this, and I mean, the majority of this film focuses on his story, it's just such a curveball. And like I said, devoid of the Halloween world, this is an interesting character in a pretty interesting and I think fairly well told story. But within the Halloween world context, it just doesn't make any sense at all. Now, at this point, Corey gets confronted by these bullies again, who we've seen earlier on in the movie. He gets pushed over this bridge and falls. And lo and behold, he gets drug into a underground tunnel, sewer tunnel, whatever, by, of course, Michael Myers. And this is 40 minutes into the movie. We finally get our first glimpse of Michael Myers, which is just way too long. And I guess my point too with this is that, like, are we really supposed to believe that for the last 4 years Michael Myers has been living and surviving in a sewage and underground tunnel, a sewer tunnel? I just that's really disappointing. Like really, like for 4 years, like nobody's seen him. I don't like where is he getting his food and water down? Like it's just kind of ridiculous. And not only is that part ridiculous, this scene where Corey gets drug into the tunnel by Myers is pretty ridiculous as well because we all know Myers. He kills everyone without prejudice, right? Like he just anybody and everybody. But he picks up Corey and somehow I guess Michael Myers has gained these what can all be described as supernatural abilities by looking into his eyes, and now he can see Corey's past trauma and everything he went through, and he takes pity and sympathizes with him and decides not to kill him, which to me is just another pretty bad choice. It's just like it doesn't correspond to anything we know about Michael Myers up until this point, and so you're just kind of throwing another curveball from a character perspective. It's like that's not what Michael Myers does. Like he doesn't take pity on people. He kills people and that's it. But he decides to take pity on Corey, which is just another decision that this movie does that I just don't really care for. So here we're about 45 minutes into the movie, and with the conclusion of that last scene where Corey and Michael really kind of meet, there's definitely kind of a hinting at that Corey is going to be more or less like the next Michael Myers. He's almost like going to be sort of the protege or something like that. Like it's kind of leading you to believe that's what's going to happen. And then I think the film really sort of confirms it with the following scene where Laurie's looking out the window, and it really harkens back to a shot from the original movie. She's looking out the window, right, and Myers is there, but this time Corey's there. And it's like, oh, well, clearly Corey's going to be the next Michael Myers. This scene all but confirms it. After this, we're introduced to Corey's mother, who is just the worst, and just, she's not even a character. She's a caricature. She's just an awful, terrible person who, again, it brings back that whole, she's blaming Laurie for everything that happened with Michael, which is just kind of crazy to me again. And also, too, like, if you're his parents and your child went through this event, and knowing how the town of Haddonfield has responded to him, it's like, why didn't they just move? Like, just get him out of there and start fresh. Why are you still here? Like, your kid is suffering and is horribly depressed and is now developing into a psychopathic killer, which she doesn't know at this point, but still, get the heck out of there. Then we get a scene with Corey and Allison, and they more or less kind of reconnect and kind of rekindle their relationship, I guess. She is clearly attracted to dark and damaged, men. She's attracted to trauma, right? And she sees him as just as broken and kind of messed up as she is, and so she's attracted to that. And then they decide to basically burn Haddonfield to the ground, right? This town has turned its back on us. We're going to turn our back on the town. We're going to burn it to the ground. Then we get to the 55-minute mark in this movie, and we finally get our first kill, which is just too long, but, whatever. This isn't Halloween Kills. There's not going to be a kill every, 10 minutes. But still, we're basically an hour into this thing. We finally get our first kill, and Corey feeds the police officer guy, more or less feeds him to Michael Myers, right? And I wrote this down in my notes. I said, this is interesting in a different movie, right? Seeing somebody become a killer and sort of almost like becoming friends or again, sort of a protege with a serial killer. Like, that's an interesting idea, and sort of feeding him victims. It's like, okay, that's kind of a cool idea, but it doesn't belong in this movie. It just doesn't fit here. And then Corey and Michael become like the dynamic duo. And Corey's got his little scarecrow mask, and we get a couple more kills after this where they kill the couple, the dentist and the co-worker of Allison's from it's not a dentist, the doctor's office that she works at or whatever. And one of the kills where Michael kills the girl is a harken back to one of the kills from the original, where he stabs the guy up against the wall and then kind of does, gives him the look sort of thing. And, a couple decent kills there, nothing great, but, fine. And so now it's like we've got this new team, though. It's Corey and Michael, and here we go. And I will give some credit where credit's due. I think that the character, like I said, is pretty interesting and pretty well written. And there's a story to be told there. And I think the performance by the guy who plays Corey, Rohan Campbell, I think he's really solid. But again, it just doesn't fit in this movie, and I feel like they could have maybe gotten away with it, or maybe would have worked a little better if he would have been in all three movies, and that kind of would have maybe been sort of a subplot to the other films that kind of weaved through all three of these. Maybe it could have been a little bit more effective, but again, as it sits, it's just not. And I will say another positive thing about this movie as well. I do like that they largely removed the attempts at comedy and humor throughout this. That was one of the things that really kind of stuck out like a sore thumb for the first two movies. I just thought all of the humor just really fell flat. And so I do appreciate that they pulled way back on that and just kind of went more serious all around. So good job there, at least. Anyways, back to the movie specifically, we get a scene where Corey and Allison are hanging out, and they're outside the radio DJ building. They get confronted by the guy, and again, he blames Laurie for everything that happened with Michael. And so again, the town of Haddonfield has completely turned their back on these two outcasts, and so we understand why they want to go dark, and they make this pact that, we're hitting the road, we're out of here. So now we're approaching about the 75 minute mark. And I wrote in my notes, where is Michael? And that, I would imagine, has got to be a huge complaint with, I know that the people who like this movie are probably more in the minority. It seems like the vast majority of people did not like this. But I think even if you really liked this movie, like, you have to be like, dude, but where's Michael? Like, this is his story in his movie. And it's just like, where the heck is this guy? He's not there. Where's Michael? I don't know. He's not here, though. He's not in Halloween Ends. But anyway, so we're at about, the 75 minute mark, like I said, and Laurie is seeing some stuff in Corey that reminds her of Michael, right? She sees that he is going to be the next psychopathic killer. And so she starts warning Allison, like, listen, this kid is bad news. You need to get out of there. But Allison isn't having any of it. She snaps and goes off on Lori, and like everybody else in the movie, starts blaming her for all the mass hysteria and for a while her friends got killed, which, again, doesn't make any sense. How is Lori responsible for the angry mobs and all that stuff? Like, she was in a hospital bed unconscious throughout the vast majority of that, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's just like, it doesn't really make any sense. Anyways, Corey continues on his murdering spree. He has now basically gone full-blown Michael Myers mode. And this next part's just basically like an observation, but his motivation behind killing people is completely different than Myers, right? Myers just kills people because they're people. Corey is actually killing people who we kind of enjoy seeing get killed because they're either bullies or just not nice people. And so, like, we enjoyed watching the doctor guy get killed because he was mean to Allison, and then he kills all the bullies and stuff like that. And so he just has a completely different motivation behind his killings. Then we get the scene where Corey goes back to kill the radio DJ guy, which this is probably my favorite kill in the movie. Because not only is it a pretty nice, gory kill, it actually got a legitimate laugh out of me when he cuts the dude's tongue off and sets it on the record player and it starts spinning around. I thought that was pretty funny. I liked it. Okay, now we're at about 90 minutes into this movie. There's about 15-20 minutes remaining. And throughout, well, a few different times throughout this, I wrote down predictions on where I thought it was going to go and how I thought it was going to end. And at the 90-minute mark, Corey confronts Lori, right? Lori calls in, oh, there's going to be a suicide here. And for a second you think, like, is she really going to kill her? Like, if they do this, that's going to be the dumbest choice ever. Of course not. She knows Corey's in the house. They have this confrontation. And then Corey kills himself. Stabs himself in the neck. And didn't see that coming. Not at all. And usually a twist or surprise in a movie that really genuinely I didn't expect is a great thing. But in this case, I was just like, why? Like, what purpose did that serve? Like, you spent this basically entire movie developing this character, taking us on this story and this journey with this guy, and then, and it's like, what was all this? Like, why did we do this? It's an astonishing decision that this movie makes. Then, of course, Allison walks through the door right as Lori is pulling the neck out of his throat because, of course, it's a movie and talk about perfect timing. Anyways, she, of course, thinks Lori killed him and, freaks out and leaves. And then Lori figures out Michael's in the house, right? And this part was kind of weird, too, because Corey is technically still alive, and then Michael, grabs him and, busts his neck and kills him. And that was just kind of weird to me, too, because, like, well, you showed sympathy through this kid throughout the entire movie, and now you decide to kill him because he stole your mask? It seems, I guess, I don't know. Anyways, we finally get the climax, the conclusion, the showdown that we've been waiting for between Lori and Michael. And it's a decent scene. It's a bit unsatisfying, anticlimactic. I mean, it's fine. I didn't hate it, but it's certainly not as good as, I think, what is the best showdown we get from Halloween H2O. That ending sequence is pretty great, but it's fine. But ultimately, it kind of leaves us unsatisfied because it felt like we took a hour and 20-minute diversion and then finally got back to what we tuned in for all along. I do kind of like the choice that they made, though, to strap Myers' dead body to the top of the car and then do like the police procession throughout the town, and then you throw Myers' dead body into a meat grinder. That was cool. I enjoyed that. And then the movie's basically over. And I will say, how it ended, I was actually kind of genuinely surprised that, like, they actually ended the story, because I thought that they were just going to lead up to Corey being the next Michael so that they could continue more Halloween movies. But being that he died and that they finally once and for all killed Michael Myers, it's like, okay, you do get a little bit of credit for finally sort of definitively ending the story. Although when you get that brief scene at the end when Laurie is writing in her memoir that evil doesn't die, it just changes shape. I think that's maybe a bit of a hint of like, yeah, we could keep going with this if we wanted to. But anyways, I think for the most part they officially end it, so I kind of appreciated that. If I could kind of describe my emotions to this movie as I was watching it, and then when it finally concluded and I realized how everything was and how it ended, I wasn't like, I wasn't mad at it. I don't hate this movie, and I understand why people do. I don't really have the kind of close personal connection with this franchise that a lot of people do. But anyways, so I wasn't like upset with it. I was just kind of baffled. This movie is really kind of mind-blowing and baffling. There's a few points throughout the movie where I was kind of just sitting there shaking my head at it. Like, I just couldn't believe that this was the direction they decided to take this story. This movie is like an anomaly. Like, I can't think of any other either trilogy or franchise set of films where it's like you're finally building to the climax and then just completely out of left field, you get something that is just totally devoid of the central conflict of your movie. Like, imagine if you got to like Return of the Jedi at the original Star Wars and you're like, okay, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, showdown, here we go, it's finally time. And then like that's just like a side plot footnote to the whole movie. And you're like, well, where's Darth Vader? Where's Luke Skywalker? Like what's happening? That's this movie. And the fact that they kill off Corey's character, to me, shows that this was all just like unnecessary filler. Like, they didn't have enough of a story to give us the Laurie Strode, Michael Myers story and movie that we wanted. And they didn't have any plans to continue with Corey being the new Michael Myers. And so by killing him off, it was just like, yeah, this is just a whole bunch of filler. And again, as I said, like, it's an interesting character and an interesting story in and of itself, but it just doesn't belong here. And it is such a baffling choice. It's just mind-blowing to me, that this thing, that they did that this thing exists. It is, it's something, man. It's really something. Anyways, those are my thoughts. I have absolutely no clue what to grade this thing. I feel like my thoughts are way too complicated. There's way too much to say about this thing to just simply boil it down to a number. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. What the heck? But that number is kind of irrelevant. So hopefully if you got to this point in the video, you've heard all my thoughts about it. And again, trying to boil it down to a number is pointless. But what the heck, I'll give it a 5. So those are my thoughts. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this. If you have seen something like this, that is just a complete curveball out of left field in the concluding chapter of a trilogy or franchise, let me know down in the comments. I gotta know if anybody else has done anything like this. I have to know, because this thing is wild. So anyways, thanks for tuning in. If you've made it to this far, you deserve a pat on the back, because this is a long review, but I had a lot to say about it. So those are my thoughts. Thank you once again for watching. If you like content like this, this is what I do on The Haunted Beard. It is horror and thriller movie content coming at you. Hit that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.